As an introduction, we'd like to acknowledge that our mission at Vose Library is to advance learning, inspire curiosity, enrich lives, and promote community. With that in mind, let me introduce our guest. It's a great picture. Carey Kish of Mount Desert Island, Maine, is an outdoors and travel writer, veteran hiker, and backpacker with more than 20,000 trail miles under his boots. Kish's hiking and camping column has appeared in the Portland Press Herald Maine Sunday Telegram for 2 decades, and his writing and photographs can be found in numerous print and online publications. The author of AMC's Best Day Hikes Along the Maine Coast and editor of the AMC Maine Mountain Guide, Kish's latest book is Beer Hiking New England, a guide to 50 hikes paired with 50 craft breweries around the 6-state region. And that will be available this spring. So without further ado, please help me welcome Carey Kish.
Oh, thank you.
Carey.
Thank you, Deborah. Nice to see you all. Thank you to everybody at the library for inviting me. And just as an aside, the research for that beer hiking book was very difficult. And I'm still kind of coming around from all of that, those trials and tribulations. So welcome everybody. I'm going to talk this evening about my favorite topic, and I hope certainly one of yours, the Appalachian Trail. It's been something I've thought about most of my life. And I think based upon my last hike of the entire trail just a few years ago, it really was a magical experience. And beauty, wonder, kindness, and friendship really define my experience between Georgia and Maine over the course of those 6 months. So people will ask me, what is it about the trail? Why hike it? What's the experience like? And Benton Mackay, the founder of the trail, really threw his idea in 1921 to walk, to see, and to see what you see. You're walking along through the woods and over the mountains through 14 states. And if you do it right, you really are seeing everything around you and feeling it. Now, I also might want to ask, well, what was it like? Well, I had the time of my life. This was 2015 was my second time around at the age of 56. And I had just the greatest time, met wonderful people, had a wonderful experience, and really kind of reached a kind of a bit of a personal nirvana. And if you've hiked any length of the Appalachian Trail, maybe some of you have hiked it all, I think you kind of know what I mean. I can also tell you about the Appalachian Trail that hiking it as I did in 1977, fresh out of Bangor High School at 18, the AT ruined my life. I don't know where I found this bumper sticker, but it's true. I really didn't know much about life at 18, does anybody? And I hiked the Appalachian Trail. I was free for 6 months. It just became a wild animal. And I think in a way, it kind of ruined my life because I always just wanted to be outdoors in the woods, hiking and climbing mountains. So in that regard, it kind of ruined my life in kind of a strange way. And it's done that to many people. Ask any through hiker. So a little bit about the Appalachian Trail. Most of you probably know it ends the northern terminus, and it ends at Mount Katahdin in the Maine woods. The trail is 2,192 miles long now, a few miles longer than when it was. There are always reroutes. In the last 5, 6, 7 years, there's been some reroutes that have lengthened the trail. It runs through 14 states along the crest of the Appalachian Mountains. An astounding figure that if you're going to hike from one end to the other, you're going to gain and lose 465, almost 465,000 feet of elevation. And that's a bit like climbing Katahdin with a full backpack on your back about every day and a half for 6 months. So just keep that in mind. And that's about how long most people take. The younger folks these days, they'll hike it in 3 or 4 months. If you really want to take your time and enjoy it, a lot of people will hike it in 5 or 6, and that's exactly what I did. Now, how much preparation does it take to get yourself ready for the AT? Some people plan for years, other people put the thing together in a few weeks and go. I do a lot of backpacking, always have, a lot of hiking. I had a lot of the gear for this 2015 hike. I started planning about 6 months before, bought some of the newer guides and the data books and the maps and all that stuff, bought food, and figured out where I was going to mail food and supplies where there weren't good grocery stores, that kind of thing. But I'll always tell you, if you want to buy me a beer sometime, we can sit down and I can actually plan your hike on the back of a cocktail napkin. Because really, in the end, it's not the planning and the gear and everything else. It's really the going that counts. It's the going that matters. And getting out there and committing yourself to the hike is really the key to doing it and being successful at it. So I had waited 36 years from my first through hike to my second. And I got to tell you, I probably thought about the AT one way or another every day in some way, shape, or form over that time. And I was lucky enough to retire a little early at 55. And much to my wife's chagrin at the onset, I said, I think I ought to hike the AT again. And I found myself in Georgia in the middle of March at Amicalola Falls State Park, ready to hike, ready to walk my way back to Maine. Now, Amicalola Falls is not on the trail. It's part of the approach trail to Springer Mountain, the start of the trail. It's about 8 miles long. But the first thing you do out of the parking lot at Amicalola Falls is you climb up about 600 stairs along the side of Georgia's highest waterfall. And believe it or not, in that 1 mile, some 20 or 25, it's ridiculous, like 20% of the people who start get to the top and go, call me a cab, I'm out of here. And the attrition statistics are astounding. In the miles, something like 30% of the people quit, and 50% of the people quit who start in the first 100 miles, and only about 20 to 25% of those who start in Georgia or wherever they start actually end up hiking the entire trail. And you can imagine somebody who quits at the top of that waterfall. They've left their wife, left their girlfriend, left their kids, sold their house, sold their car, quit their job, whatever it might be, and bought $5,000 worth of gear. And then all of a sudden they realize, oh my goodness, this is not for me. This is not what I imagined. And you know what? It's not what you imagine for a lot of people, but yet the key to success, and there's a lot of them, is that you stick it out and you keep going. There are so many reasons to quit sometimes, it's overwhelming. And staying on the trail and sticking with it day after day is a really hard thing to do, even for an experienced person. So my lovely wife hiked with me a few miles on the way to Springer Mountain. That's a friend of mine, Don from Harpswell, hiked a few, I'd say 300-400 miles with me. And we almost made it to Springer on the first day, came to a shelter at Black Gap. And this is very typical of where I would sleep on a typical evening on the Appalachian Trail, in a shelter made of wood or concrete or whatnot, or in my tent. There's my kitchen, a stove, a bag full of food, a titanium spoon that was also a knife and a fork. And there's my whole setup for 6 months in the outdoors. Now, the other thing you got to realize when you're outdoors for 6 months is that this is what we woke up to on the first morning: torrential rain. It rains a lot on the Appalachian Trail, or most times it does. And you have to be prepared to hike in the rain and get wet, and you have to do it with a smile. So our first day, the top of Springer Mountain, the official southern terminus of the trail, the first blazed the famous bronze placard, and it's pouring rain, and there's my buddy and I headed off to Maine. And yes, I think we're smiling under there somewhere. Now, of course, this wasn't my first rodeo, 2015. That's me fresh out of Bangor High School. I look like I know what I'm doing in that picture, but I don't. I was scared to death, and rightly so, because I was only 18 and really didn't know what the heck was going on. I thought I did, but hiked the trail that year, and like I said, it was a life changer. It was a life changer. I just wanted to be free. I got freedom, bit of freedom DNA in me. It has never left. So Georgia, you're hiking through 14 states. Georgia in the springtime is absolutely fabulous. It's a ridge line, more or less, ups and downs, about 80 miles. You're hiking along the Tennessee Divide. The waters to your right empty into the Atlantic, to your left empty into the Gulf of Mexico, to the north empty into the Tennessee Valley. And there's no leaves on the trees. You're up about 4,000 feet. The high point is Blood Mountain, but you can see forever when you're on these mountaintops. It's quite a while before the leaves start to come out in the south. Your first resupply point is about 50 miles up the trail at a place called Neal's Gap. And this is a big place where a lot of people quit. They get a little taste of civilization, they get a shower, do a little laundry, get a bunk, get a meal. And it's like, oh, you know what? I don't really want to go back to that hiking thing. And this is very typical. You can see the bunk set up there on the left. It's a typical hiker hostel, very Spartan accommodations. At Neal's Gap, there's also an outfitter, and these guys have got a gold mine there. They'll do a pack shakedown for you, and which means they can look through all your gear. You let them look through all your gear, and you can sort out what you should have, what you shouldn't have, and then they get to sell you a lot of stuff. But they're really good about it. And there's also a hiker box, the first hiker box of many, which is where hikers will discard things they don't need, and you can pick and choose from that. And they have these all along the trail. That's up in the upper right there. On the bottom right is the amount of gear people are UPSing home after one weekend from this outfitter. That's all the stuff people packed in their packs that they were discarding. And this is just a couple of days in the spring. And people are coming through Georgia, for 4 months. It's just astounding. I left my lovely wife. She hiked a few miles beyond Neal's Gap with me. I would not see her again for 4 months. So part of hiking a long trail is that you leave everything behind. And I had to leave Fran behind. But I was out on my own, meeting new people every day, sleeping in a different spot every day, enjoying the views, enjoying being out in the woods on my own and following those white blazes to the north. And just like that, the first state has gone by, 80 miles of Georgia, and you're into North Carolina and Tennessee, where the trail follows the Appalachians right along the North Carolina-Tennessee border for almost 400 miles. I did get a little bit of snow and cold weather right on, but I was lucky in that just a couple of days of snow. A lot of hikers in some spring years will be trudging through foot-deep snow. Part of that is because a lot of hikers, some hikers will start too early in the spring, which I don't recommend. Mid-March, early April is plenty of time to get you to Katahdin before it closes in October. Then you get up into the Nantahala National Forest. You're into the mountains that are over 5,000 feet. Eventually, you're going to get into 6,000 foot mountains. And remember, no leaves in the spring. So the views, they call Standing Indian the grand stand of the Southern Appalachians, and for good reason. And finally, you reach Albert Mountain, and you get to that first benchmark, that first milestone. Scrawled on the side of the fire tower there is 100 miles. Oh my gosh, I've walked 100 miles. How wonderful am I? This is great. I only have 2,100 miles to go. Imagine that. There are a variety of different shelters along the trail. There are campsites where you set up your tent. Shelters come in every shape and size. Typically 3-sided, with hopefully with a roof that doesn't leak. Sometimes there's a covered portico where you can cook before you go to bed. It's very typical to get to camp, collect your water, cook your dinner, get in your sleeping bag, and crash because you've been on your feet all day hiking up and down mountains. And this is typical of the sleeping arrangements. Very close, very cozy with people you may not know, but you will come to know over time. But I'd like to introduce you to some of my trail mates. Over here on the left, her name is Snorer. Oh, that's me, Snorer 2. That's a snorer, that's a snorer, and that's a snorer. Back at Neil's Gap, I spent the best $3 I probably ever spent in my life. I bought 3 sets of orange industrial earplugs, and I never had a problem in any of the shelters. So I highly recommend that if you're going to hike the AT. And you can see over here on the right where we're hanging our food bags at night to keep them away from the critters. The Southern Appalachians are just scattered with these high mountains, and they're bald, grassy bald. They're as high as our White Mountains, high as Katahdin and Saddleback. But down there, instead of rocks, they have grassy summits, and they're beautiful. Again, views to forever. Just like that, you're 200 miles into the trail and you're into the Great Smokies, and you cross Fontana Dam, the highest dam east of the Mississippi, and the Smokies. Everybody wants to hike in the Smokies. You can see too that a little bit of green is starting to show up on the trees. Smokies hikers are required by the National Park Service to camp together either in the shelters or in a tent nearby. So it's a pretty social experience. They're kind of crammed together at night, but you have to do the trail and the wild country along the trail all day long to yourself. So it's no matter. The highest point of the trail is this crazy looking spaceship type observation tower at top Clingman's Dome, 6,600 feet. That's 1,400 feet higher than our Katahdin and higher than Mount Washington. But yet there are trees almost to the top. The views in the Smokies are fantastic. The trail was built back in the 30s, I think, by the CCC, and the walking is wonderful. Right after the Smokies, I did my biggest day. And you might ask, well, what did you hike every day? 8 to 10 miles at first, 10 to 12 for a while, 15, and then it was 15 to 20. I decided to take the hair approach to the whole thing and do lesser miles each day, but keep doing them consistently. But this was my first big day. It was 17 miles, took me all darn day till almost sundown. I wanted to get to this place called Max Patch Ball, which was not part of, it wasn't protected by the Appalachian Trail. The trail didn't go over it in 1977. And I wanted to get there, and I got there at 7:30 at night, and I plunked my tent right on top of the mountain, and I had that beautiful grandstand of a campsite. One of the best nights of the entire trip. Soon after that, I visited Hot Springs, one of the, I'd say there's probably at least 24 towns along the trail or near the trail that you can go into, get a shower, a room, a bed, do some laundry, get a meal, buy some groceries, go to the post office, go to the hardware store, whatever you need. And I visited Hot Springs, of course. It was one of my favorite trail towns many years ago. And you can see it's almost Andy of Mayberry, like in 77. And it doesn't look all that much different today. It's kind of cool. Those mile markers, those benchmarks started to add up on Big Butt, 300 miles. Oh my goodness, I only have 1,900 miles to go. But part of the beauty of walking, well, especially if you're from Maine, you want to walk home, but you're also, it's the traditional way of doing the trail. You are walking north with the seasons, starting in late winter, walking through spring into summer and into fall in Maine. And it's really wild. So all of a sudden, the Mayapple, the Trillium, the spring beauties were starting to come out, and the trail was really starting to come alive. The leaves were coming out as well. Now, if you know anything about me, I love to camp on mountaintops, and I did it anytime I possibly could. That's Big Bald Mountain on the right, excuse me, on the left, and there's my campsite with the sun going down. Whenever I could camp with a view up high, I certainly did it. And this is very typical. This is my living room for 6 months. That's me and my smelly feet and legs sticking out there. This is my little one-person tent. I've got all my gear stuffed inside. I've just had dinner. I'm probably taking a nip of bourbon right now. I've just, there's my cooking set up, my smelly boots outside, and that's my view for the evening. And that was life for the better part of 6 months. The mountains down south, absolutely lovely. The Southern Appalachians, sublime walking. And the trail is very well marked. There's signage, you have maps, and you can really just enjoy yourself and get these huge views. In the Roan Highlands, you go over Hunt Mountain and a few of the other peaks, Grassy Ball, Roan Ball, and you're up over, excuse me, you're up over 6,000 feet for the last time, enjoying views from that height until New Hampshire. And finally, Laurel Fork Gorge, one of the most beautiful waterfalls in Tennessee. That's in Tennessee, one of the most beautiful on the entire trail. And then you're into Virginia. Now, everybody has a trail name. Back in '77, that wasn't the case. In 2015, everybody had a trail name. I happened to get the name Beer Man. I stumbled into, it was a Sunday morning, of course, stumbled into this, right along the trail, came to a road crossing, stumbled into a party of the after party of a bunch of hikers. There was a church group doing a breakfast feed for hikers over to the left, and there was this group of bedraggled hikers over on the right at this road crossing. I looked at the church group, and their food smelled great, nice and clean people. Over on the left of these bedraggled hikers, and they had a few cases of unopened beer and a smoldering fire. I went for the beer. By 9 o'clock, I'd had a couple beers, and my partner came down out of the woods, and he goes, "Look at you, you're the Beer Man." So the name stuck. So you had Mr. Don, you had Drop Bear, you had Sam I Am, every manner of trail name, and it was always better. I loved the name that I was given, Beer Man. But it's always better to have to give yourself a name rather than have someone give you a name. There are some wild ones out there. So how did I get that name? Well, I just kind of told you, but also I had a great time. I didn't overdo it, but I always loved having a beer when I got into town. I loved trail magic with the beer along the way. I had a lot of fun. So Virginia, a quarter of the whole trail is in the state of Virginia. And pretty soon you hit one of the best trail towns soon into Virginia called Damascus, one of the favorite trail towns of all time along the AT. But Virginia, a lot of hikers will get what they call the Virginia blues, because you're going to be in Virginia for more than 500 miles, which for most is 4 or 5 weeks. And you just feel like you're in Virginia forever, and you hate it after a while. And I had none of that. Virginia is a beautiful, and spring, the leaves are coming out, the weather's turning really good. And you're just doing ridge walking and ridge walking and ridge walking. That's how Virginia is. And sure, you have to cross the valleys, descend and climb, and then you're on another ridge and you go. Virginia to me was absolutely fantastic country. And at Mount Rogers, the state's highest mountain, there are feral ponies. And I got to see the feral ponies. I even got nibbled on the leg by one of them. But this is wild up in the mountains at 5,000 feet. And you've got these beautiful ponies roaming around. An open country, and you're passing another milestone, 500 miles. Now, I got to meet and hike with all kinds of wonderful people, with great trail names, great stories, and that is really in the end, and you'll get this by the end of this talk. The trail was beautiful. I loved every day. I loved being in the wilds, loved being in the woods, but it was the people that I met and hiked with along the trail, the people I met in the trail towns, in the hostels, the ones who gave me rides, gave me the food and beer, the trail magic. The people really, in the end, made the experience, and I've made lifelong friends. And it just fills you, because out here, this is a whole different slice of life. It's almost like kind of like life how it should be. There's just generosity, and there's kindness, and people care about you. And you don't even know really sometimes what people's stories are, what their background is. You just know you're relating to them on a one-on-one. The trail is your bond. And it's just beautiful. It's life really at a very simple level. As spring progresses, the wildflowers come out, the rhododendron, the azalea, it's just the laurels, and you're walking north with spring, and things are just getting more beautiful as you go. The waterfalls, the beautiful campsites. And as you get through Central Virginia, you do step into West Virginia for a little bit. The trail was rerouted maybe 20 years ago, and you're up on these beautiful high grassy slopes. And I loved West Virginia. The people were so darn friendly. I came down to a road at one point, and this lovely young couple stops and they roll down the window all hot and sweaty. I've been out hiking all day. And the fellow says, would you like a cold beer? And I said, well, of course, absolutely. And his wife or girlfriend, or whatever, says, and we've got turkey sandwiches. Would you like one of those? Well, of course I would. Classic example of just happy people wanting to help hikers whenever they could. And it's a story of a long walk. Almost every long walk, actually. It doesn't have to be the AT. So campsites, again, when I had the opportunity, I would tent out on the ridge tops, tent out on the summits, tent out in the high lean-tos above the trees, at the tree line, wherever I could, because you always wanted to get, if you could, those sunrises and sunsets. There's just nothing like them. We don't get enough of them, and we only get so many in life. In north central Virginia, you get up to where what they call the area where they call the Triple Crown. Dragon's Tooth is a beautiful pillar of rock. I didn't have it in me to climb to the top of it. A lot of hikers do. And then you walk for a good mile along beautiful Tinker Cliffs. And then you get to one of the most iconic spots on the entire trail, McAfee Knob. And I wanted that picture. It was rainy and cloudy and miserable the last time I was through there. I wanted that picture so bad, and I got the perfect day. You really are standing out on the edge of that precipice, and the view is that beautiful. It is that spectacular. And I treasure this probably almost more than any other photo I have. It's a beautiful place to be and a beautiful feeling to have when you're standing out there at McAfee Knob. So I talked to you a little bit about rain. Well, this is a patch I found, and it's so true. The adage is no rain, no pain, no pain, no rain, no Maine. If you can't walk in the rain, if you can't endure the rain, put up with the rain, put up with the pain, the aches, the blisters, the bug bites, the filth of being, unshowered for days at a time. You're just dirty and smelly. You get used to it, but still, if you can't endure that, because that's all part of the game. And I don't mean to paint a bad picture of it. It's just you become all of that. The more you can embrace those things, the better your hike will be, the better your attitude will be, and the more successful you will be. Because if you let those things get to you, you just won't last out there. So you've got to embrace the pain, embrace the rain, and you will then get to Maine. By rain, I had great weather for most of my last through hike along the AT, but I did have a shocking week of bad weather in Northern Virginia. It started to rain on a Sunday or Monday morning, and it rained, I swear, nonstop for almost a week. I mean, it was raining when I went to bed. It was raining through the night. It was raining when I got up. It was raining all day long. You didn't even want to. You almost couldn't stop unless there was a shelter of some sort during the day to eat your lunch or snack. And then after 3-4 days like that, everything is wet. It doesn't matter. Everything is wet. You're wet. All your clothes are wet. All your gear is wet. You're setting up stuff wet. You're packing it away wet. And then one day, 4, 5, 6 days later, the clouds break, and like they always say, the sun will come out. And you get down to the road into Waynesboro, and there's a hot dog stand, and you eat 5 of them, and you get a cold soda pop, and all is well with the world. And you think, rain? What rain? Shenandoah National Park is a favorite of hikers. It's about 100 miles long, the stretch through there. There are campgrounds, there are visitor centers, there are places to get a shower and meals. It's really kind of a sweet little week-long vacation, and it's pretty too. There are also a heck of a lot of bears in Shenandoah, and I think I saw most every one of them on my week in Shenandoah. I do remember walking along the trail and seeing these little cubs up in the trees. That's actually the same picture, the same one, but there were two. There was one and then another. And my first thought, much to my wife's chagrin, she always yells at me for this kind of stuff. My first thought was, well, I got to pull my camera out and get a picture of it. And so I'm fumbling with my camera, getting a photo of the cub up in the tree. Of course, most people smarter than I know that Mother Bear is not far away. And no doubt Mother Bear was right in the bushes making a lot of noise behind me all of a sudden. And so I did the worst thing ever. I was between the mother bear and her cub. And then another cub came out of the bushes and jumped up into that tree, but I didn't get a picture of that because now I was scared. So somehow I backed out of that whole situation off the trail and let the mother bear do her thing. And it took about a half hour, 40 minutes before she came and got her cubs, and they all went away. And it might have been a couple hours before my heart stopped beating like crazy. Out of Virginia, you do cross finally into West Virginia for the second and last time, and you end up in Harper's Ferry, which is where the Appalachian Trail Conference has their headquarters, and they have for years and years. And they're the folks responsible for maintaining the trail and doing all the good things and coordinating the maintenance amongst the various chapters and that kind of thing. And there's me, 1977, with my huge 5,000 cubic inch orange backpack. And then just a few years ago when I was there for the second time, I signed in, I got my Polaroid taken, which they put into a big folder for all the hikers. Everybody gets their Polaroid taken, and I walked out into the street. I called my wife and I just started bawling in tears. This is the psychological halfway point. You're about 1,000 miles into the hike. And I was just blobbering to my wife on the phone that, oh my gosh, I had made it. This is a really big milestone to get there. And I was just so emotional. You can just imagine that. That's just how much the trail means to me. It's how much the trail means to a lot of people. It's really, there's a big emotion. Maryland comes next, just a short 41-mile stretch. A lot of hikers these days will do what's called the Maryland Challenge. They'll hike Maryland in 24 hours, all 41 miles. I was 56. I wanted nothing to do with that. And so I just hiked at my own pace and took a nice 2.5 days. Hung out on the cliffs, saw the original Washington Monument, that milk bottle shaped structure there, and just had a grand old time through Maryland. And lo and behold, next thing I'm up north. I crossed the Mason-Dixon line and I'm in Pennsylvania. And you know, it's now, it's early summer now and the weather is perfect. You're hiking in just your shorts and a t-shirt every day. The weather's hot and sweaty and you're passing milestones left and right. You're hiking through the piney forest of southeastern Pennsylvania. You're passing the real halfway point, the 1,100 mile mark, and bang, bang, bang. You know, it's like, wow, I'm halfway there. I'm really halfway there. And then you run into a place called Pine Grove Furnace. This is where this challenge has been going on, called the half-gallon challenge, for decades. This is where it's a silly thing. If you eat a half-gallon of ice cream, you get a commemorative wooden spoon that says you've hiked you've eaten this whole thing, which is kind of silly. It was 9 o'clock in the morning when I got to the Pine Grove Furnace General Store, and already, I swear, there were a couple of hikers just writhing in pain on the grass. Others just looked like they were turning white and they were gonna be ill. And then my buddy Five, he was a retired cop from Cleveland. He had eaten his half-gallon of ice cream and was working on the half-gallons of a bunch of other hikers. He was just a total animal. I sufficed it with just a chocolate and vanilla bar on a stick. But he was still going when I left. And before I left and hiked on, he had ordered a cheeseburger and fries. So he was a complete animal, and he just put everybody to shame, especially all the younger hikers. What a guy. It was fun to hike with. That's the half. So Pennsylvania, you cross through the agricultural lands in the center of the state. They've weaved a nice trail route through the cornfields and all the different agricultural fields. I hit Duncannon at the Susquehanna River, and some things don't change all that much. That's me going into the pub in '77 and the same pub in Duncannon in 2015. The beers were a little more expensive and so were the burgers. In '77, you could get for 75 cents a big fat burger and fries and a mug of beer. I think it was about 5 times that a couple of 3 years ago. After the Susquehanna River, the geology of Pennsylvania changes, and it's rocks, 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 rocks. And these rocks want to cut you, they want to rip your skin, they want to chip you, they want to break your bones. And it's hard to get a good picture, especially when it rains, and it rained in Pennsylvania. These rocks become slippery, and they just want you to fall and hurt yourself. And you're walking on rocks for 100 miles. It's beautiful country, but the rocks are a complete pain, and there's no way around them. So Pennsylvania, really, that when you leave Pennsylvania and head into New Jersey, you go, see your rocks, I've had enough of you. God bless Pennsylvania. But that's where I met a good buddy from Maine walking home. He had a little Maine license plate on the back of his backpack. He was from Gray, Maine. Crossed the 1,200-mile mark, got some nice blackberries. And speaking of blackberries, what did I eat on the trail? I ate everything. I sent myself freeze-dried food. I picked up food at the grocery store. I had a whole regimen of food, a menu that I sent to myself. I found that the grocery store started carrying, just that year that I remember, single serving packets of Spam, which I love to cook over an open fire. I know, who doesn't love Spam, right? I ate everything. And when I got into town, I ate more. Burgers, fries, eggs and bacon, pizza, Fruit Loops, donuts, absolutely everything. Because the beauty of through hiking is you cannot eat enough food. You're burning 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day. You can't carry that much food, and you can't eat that much food on the trail. So when you get into town, you just go whole hog and you just eat till you drop. And it's amazing. And you lose weight. Absolutely incredible. Finally, the state of my birth, absolutely New Jersey. I love it. New Jersey gets a bad rap. It's actually one of the prettiest parts of the entire trail. You're up on Kittatinny Ridge. You pass Sunfish Pond, the first natural lake coming north from the south, and the views are beautiful. It's also home to the highest concentration of black bears in the eastern United States, and I saw plenty of black bears, not as close as before, but it's they're out there and they want your food, and you have to beware and take precautions. Finally, after the high point in New Jersey, like a bunch of drowned rats. This is a bunch of guys I hiked with for a while. Look at us. It's now 90 degrees every day. You are hot, sweaty, dirty, and tired, and you just look like a bedraggled bunch of guys crossing into New York. And at Route 17, I was able to arrange with my cousin Jerry in New Jersey. He picked me up at 17. I ended up getting a train to New York City, a train to Boston, a bus to Portland, Maine, and I came home and my lovely wife picked me up. It was our anniversary. I'd been away for 4 months anyway by that point. I spent a week at home in Maine, hanging out with friends, hanging out with Fran, doing a few things here on the island, and then it was back to New York and back to work. Soon after I got back to the trail, I crossed the Bear Mountain Bridge, the Hudson River, the lowest point of the trail, just above sea level. But I was into what I loved most because I'm an old New Jersey, New York guy from way back. I love delis, and any deli. If there was a deli anywhere, if I could sniff it out, if it was in my guidebook anywhere near a road crossing, I was going to that deli. If I'd been to a deli just 5 miles before, I didn't care. I went to the next deli. If there was another deli in 2 miles, I went to the deli. Remember, I could eat. We could all eat. And I just absolutely loved it. The other thing, in the heat of Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, a lot of the trail angels would put gallons of water along the trail near the road crossings because the water sources would dry up in the heat of the summer. And a lot of places in some stretches, there was no water at all. And these beautiful trail angels, I think it was at Route 17, there must have been 150 jugs of water that this group of trail angels maintained all summer long for the through hikers. God bless them. God bless them. Finally, Connecticut. I'm home. It's New England. I've gotten there. Only about 500 to go. Along the Housatonic River, there's a 5-mile stretch. It's so beautiful. It's level. It's the only level 5-mile stretch along the entire trail. It's glorious. I stayed in some lovely hostels with beautiful dogs. Went through Kent, Connecticut, slept in the backyard of a clothing store with a bunch of other hikers. had some wonderful trail magic, met some more great people. And you got to know now that I'm physically fit like never before. I'm having the time of my life. I have no worries. I've thought about everything. My head is free. I've reached trail nirvana, and I'm just having the time of my life. Getting up every day, putting my pack on, and just walking. And maybe I know where I'm going to end up that night. Maybe I don't. If it's hard to imagine just how carefree you really can be. But on the Appalachian Trail, doing a hike like this, you can reach that if you let yourself. Met a lot of old friends, new friends, honeymooners, folks. This gentleman right here, John, worked for Maine Hudson Trails. I've met him a bunch of times up and down the trail. But these friends I did not need to meet. One day coming out of Sharon, Connecticut, the hostile person dropped me off. I was hiking up the trail. I really wasn't awake yet, hadn't had enough coffee. And something told me not to put my left foot down on the trail. And darn it, I looked down and there was this big rattlesnake, the second or third one I'd seen, but not that close. Almost stepped right on the rattlesnake, and it was big. It went to the left into the bushes. I went to the right into the bushes, and never the two shall meet again. And off I went. It was pretty scary. But had I not thought to look, I would have stepped right on the darn thing, and who knows what would have happened. Massachusetts, the Berkshires. I used to live in the Berkshires in Pittsfield. It was wonderful walking through a lot of the old terrain that I wandered around in as a kid. At Upper Goose Pond, the National Park Service runs a cabin, and the caretaker brings you in the morning and fixes you coffee and blueberry pancakes. The pond was just perfect for rinsing out your clothes and taking a dip. Wonderful. Not long after Upper Goose Pond, I came to this trail magic, not far from a roadhead, and there was fresh fruit and sodas and chocolate, Reese cups. And the maxim for trail magic is don't take too much. You got to leave plenty for the people coming behind you. But it was hot. It was just one of those days, and I saw all this good stuff. It was all on ice, and I just basically put my head into the cooler and was just stuffing my face with strawberries and blueberries and Reese cups. And I had like a squirrel's face of stuff. And I'm down there on my knees with my head in the cooler. And all of a sudden I see a shadow coming over me. The owner of the cooler, Grizzly, he had hiked the trail the year before, and it was his trail magic. He was coming back with more ice for his cooler. And I looked up at him with this mouth full and the juice of the fruit coming out of my mouth. And I said, I'm so sorry. He says, dude, don't worry about it. There's plenty. That's just one. After Mount Greylock, which is where the story begins way back in the 60s, I saw my first white blaze on a family vacation to Mount Greylock, coming up the road to Mount Greylock. And I never forgot about the Appalachian Trail. It's the reason I wanted to hike the trail in the first place. Because the thought of a white blaze is going that way for seemingly ever, and white blaze is going that way for seemingly ever. It's a concept that just has stuck with me forever. You know, on my two hikes through Vermont, of the AT, both times I've gotten to Vermont in the middle of August when the weather is perfect. It's 70 degrees, and Vermont is always a favorite because you've got beautiful lakes and streams to swim in, and it seems like the weather is always good. So I have to call Vermont once again, besides Maine, my favorite state to hike through. And it's beautiful trail. And again, it's high summer, and you're just feeling fine. And I'm getting close enough to home where friends are meeting me, bringing me cold beer. Gotta love it. Leaving Vermont, you come down this, the trail comes out on this little road, and you walk the lane down towards the Connecticut River. You're gonna cross over into New Hampshire. And all along, there were little stations. People set out chairs and tables, and there were snacks and sodas and watermelon and all kinds. And a little kid's family had a lemonade stand out, and it was all trail magic for hikers. And it just about made me cry. Well, it did make me cry. And at one, I kept noticing these little folders, but I was interested in the food and the sodas and all that. And finally, I picked up one of the folders, and it was a whole list of people you could call when you got down into Hanover. and you could stay with them if they had room that night, or they would bring you to take you to a movie or bring you to shopping to do your laundry. And I called a few of them. It's like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. And finally, third or fourth one, they were all very polite. So no, I can't now, but keep calling down the list. And finally, I got this fellow, Greg Cook. And Greg has been taking in hikers like everybody else in that area. And he comes and picks me up when I got into downtown Hanover, brings me over to his house, gets me out of my clothing, and gives me a nice terry cloth bathrobe and a towel. He says, give me all those clothes. He starts laundry for me. He sets me up in a 4-poster bed, a queen bed up in a room, air conditioning, widescreen TV, beer in the fridge, food, everything, yada, yada. And I'm in there for 5, 10, 15 minutes in his house. And he says, oh, by the way, I've got a date tonight. I'm leaving. The house is yours. Have fun. I'd known the guy 15 minutes. And I tell you, this is the beauty. This is the trail. This is the trail community. This is the magic. Greg Cook, you're an angel to me. And there were so many like Greg along the trail. Finally, New Hampshire. And I'm, let's see, 43 minutes. I'm getting to wrap it up here pretty quick. New Hampshire, you cross the Connecticut River. And I learned a statistic that I didn't need to know, but I'll never forget it now. I got into New Hampshire. So I got New Hampshire and Maine to go. By the time you reach New Hampshire, you walk 80% of the miles of the Appalachian Trail, but you've only done 50% of the effort. Meaning I had enough mountains to climb, enough elevation gain. I had only done half of the work. And true, you're entering the White Mountains, which are high and tough and rugged. And then you've got to do Maine, which is equally as hard. It's like, oh my gosh, I got work to do. And I did. So a little bit about health. I went through 2 pairs of boots and had 0 blisters. Not a hot spot, not a red spot. I credit that to finding a pair of boots, Loa Renegade, Gore-Tex Renegade mid boots. They are the most wonderful boots. They fit me perfect. You know, boots are a very individual thing, but not a blister. I've now had 7 pairs of them, walk the Appalachian Trail, the Florida Trail, and the Pacific Crest Trail, not a blister. So it's amazing. I also lost 32 pounds, got back to my Bangor high school weight. Incredible for eating all of that food, but yet hiking 20 miles a day. I also avoided drinking bad water, getting eaten by a bear, poison ivy, and getting bit by a rattlesnake. So I was a pretty lucky guy throughout my 189 days on the AT. So the first week in New Hampshire was pretty easy. I slack packed, meaning I stayed at my friends Amy's and Charlie's over in Franconia, and my wife was there with me, and I had food and shower every night, nice warm bed, and I just had to carry a light day pack and do the miles each day, and then somebody would come pick me up and bring me back and feed me and beer me. So that was a whole week of that, which was wonderful, a wonderful way to clean up about 100 miles. But then I had to put the backpack on and get to the hard work of getting over the Franconia range and through the Presidential range. I did stay at some of the AMC huts as a customer, but I'll tell you, I remember walking across the Presidentials from Mizpah Hut to Madison Hut, right over the top of Washington and the other peaks. 70 degrees on September 1st. I was shirtless and not a breath of wind. It's just incredible. And there's some pictures of my day over Mount Washington. You just don't get that kind of weather very often. Finally, folks, the state of Maine, my home state, the finest place on the planet, and you know that. Through Mahoosic Notch, through the rugged Mahoosics, I stopped writing in my journal. I didn't need any maps. I was home. The end of the hike was near, and I was on home turf, and I was just enjoying every day, every moment, every footstep through our beautiful state. And I hiked all of the state before over the years, but it was just great to see it all. And being close to home, people knew, well, first of all, you got to be reading Stephen King if you're hiking through Maine, right? And people would leave me beers along the way, trail magic of beers here and there, because people were following me on Facebook, and it was great. I'd get these notes, beer man, look at the bushes, you got beer. Over the Bigelows, past the 2,000 mile mark, I got shuttled across the Kennebec River, which is the widest crossing with no bridge on the whole AT. The shuttle guy canoes over and he picks you up and brings you across. And you'll notice they even paint a little white blaze in the bottom of the canoe so that your hike is a continuous hike. This beautiful sunrise here on the right is my section of the trail that my wife and I maintain, East Carey Pond. And it's one of the most beautiful spots in the world. And I got to camp right on my own section of the AT. Finally, Monson. The Lakeshore House, Rebecca Anderson. Sadly, she sold the place in downtown Monson last year. But she had a lot of the thru hikers' names from Maine that were coming along, and she was waiting for us all. And there was my name when I got there, Beer Man. My lovely wife met me, and off into the 100-mile wilderness I went. And I'll tell you, I was my feet barely touched the ground throughout the 100-mile wilderness. There's a sight of Katahdin, my first of the entire trip from the top of Whitecap Mountain. Had a few beautiful, lonely nights of solitude, beautiful campsites along the way. And again, even in the 100-mile wilderness, people were looking for Beer Man and leaving me cold beer. I tell you, that name Beer Man really worked in my favor. I didn't carry beer like some people thought. I consumed beer that people would give me. It was wonderful. The guys from Chewonki, Greg Shute, was kind enough to, they own a cabin, a bunch of cabins at Fort Debskinag Lake, and they had arranged for me to stay with them when I passed by the right off the trail. And lucky thing too, they had satellite internet there, and I helped. I worked. I ended up spending an entire 2 nights, 1 day there. 5 inches of rain fell that day, and because they could see it on the satellite, and they said, "Beer Man, you're not leaving. You're staying with us the second night." And they put me to work. They were closing up the place for the year, but we worked. They had hot showers, 3 meals a day. Wonderful group of folks. I got so lucky. Finally, Herd Brook Lean-To, end of the 100-mile wilderness right by the Golden Road. Last lean-to on the AT. I approached Herd Brook Lean-To after stumbling across the brook, and I could see that there was a beer on the floor of the lean-to on the sleeping platform, and it was a cold. It was a PBR beer, and I was hoping it was full. And gosh darn it, I picked it up, and there was a note from my friend Dana, thru hiker from 1991. PBR was here, Beer Man was here, PBR now gone. Coincidence? I love my buddy. And there he is with his love. That's my lovely wife. I hiked out to the Golden Road with them. Met his wife Janet, our friend Pat Johnson at A-Ball Bridge. Beautiful view of Katahdin. We slack packed up to Katahdin Stream. I got my application to be an official thru hiker, if you can imagine. And then I made my way up with my crew who came up to meet me up to the top of Katahdin, the final 5 miles. And I just wanted my friend Pat captured the last 30 seconds of my hike, and it just blows me away. And here it is. And there's folks, 189 days, Georgia to Maine, 2,190 miles. And there, just for perspective, that's 1977 right there atop Katahdin. I have a thing about orange jackets and black hats, I guess. By the way, if you follow the AT or have for years, that's Warren Doyle right here in that picture in 1977, after his 3rd thru hike. He's hiked it, he's still alive. He's hiked it 18 times. So my wife, my wonderful friends, gotta love it. Thank everybody. Oh, and this is, I'll wrap it up here. On the right is a picture, my picture in the Bangor Daily News after my thru hike in 1977. And you can tell I'm a little bit of a nut job when it comes to this. I had waited all of these years to recreate. I hoped to God that I had the good fortune, the good health, to be able to do the trail one day again. And I did. I did. And I always wanted to recreate that same picture. And the picture on the left, of course, is me in October of 2015. So finally, what this really is all about, like I told you at the beginning, people are the trail magic. All the people I hung out with, all the people I met, the people in the restaurants, the people in the hostels, the people in the pubs, the people in the lean-tos on the trail every day, the people that cooked your food, the people that gave you rides, everybody. I mean, there are nothing but smiles here. People love the trail community. They love the hikers. They love, there's just love. There's just love out there. And that is the essence of the experience. You have the beautiful walk through the wilds of the Appalachian Mountains, and then you have the beauty of the people who come to mean so much to you all around you every day, all the way from Georgia to Maine. It's mind-boggling. I've been trying to write a book about this. It's really difficult. It's a terrible excuse, but it's hard to get it all down on paper. But I'm getting. It's a beautiful experience. So finally, the Appalachian Trail. This is on the trail my 77 hike, and this is remote for detachment, narrow for chosen company, winding for leisure, lonely for contemplation. The trail leads not only north and south, but upward to the body, mind, and soul of man, of humankind. And that describes the essence of the experience. So thank you all. That was really wonderful, and I appreciate your time and indulgence. It's a wonderful trip. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Carey. That was fabulous and incredibly touching at the same time. I haven't seen anything in the chat, but please take the last few minutes here and put any questions you have there, or please unmute and feel free to ask away.
I won't be offended if there aren't any questions. Sometimes I get accused of covering things a little too much. So I don't know. So.
Maybe Courtney?
Oh, I have a question. Is there anyone out there that's joined in tonight that has hiked the AT or would love to hike the AT at some point? Wow, all right, we have one.
Carey, I'm
Cindy?
going to have you stop
Yes.
share screen so that we can see you better now.
I'm sorry.
I'm going to have you stop share screen.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
That's okay, so that we can see you.
How do I stop? There we go. Stop share.
There, great. Marion is saying no questions, but thank you for this fabulous presentation. Peter, what was your lowest point over 100 plus days, 180 plus days?
My lowest point, you mean from an emotional standpoint? I'm assuming. I'll assume that. When I left the trail in New York to come home for my anniversary to see my wife and all, which was a very important thing, needed to be done, of course. My trail family, my tramily as they call it, moved on. And I was off the trail for 10 or 11 days. So when I came back to the trail to do the last 800 miles, I was on my own. I had no trail family. And interestingly enough, I did not develop another trail family for the rest of the hike. So for the last 900 miles, I mean, you're hiking the trail alone every day anyway, and occasionally you're camping alone, but a lot of times you're camping with people. But I did have a trail family up to that point. And then after that, not again. And at first, I missed all those folks. I loved them. We were very tight. I'd just been home to see my wife. I was home. I was home here in Maine. So I got homesick. I had no trail family. My wife was back home. yada, yada, yada. And so that was really, and I was in New York. I was 10 days out of shape already, and it was hot and sweaty, and the hiking was rugged. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wasn't into it. I'd kind of lost my mojo, but it's like, no way I'm quitting. But I really kind of felt like I might, because everything had changed. And then, like I said to you all before, you just got to keep going. Tomorrow will be better. Tomorrow will be better. And it is. It really, it's kind of a, it's a microcosm of life itself. And so I just got back into it, and I ended up hiking all the way to Maine, to Katahdin, really on my own. And I really came into my own. My hike really became my own in those last 2.5 months, over 800 miles. So I went from the low point to the highest point in that time. So I hope that answers the question a little bit.
Sounds
So-
like, yeah. Mary's saying we were too entranced with the story to ask a question. Mike, thank you so much for sharing your experience. And Doug said, amazing presentation, thank you. So I'm not seeing other questions unless people had unmuted to ask. I'll just wait for just a few seconds to see if that's the case. Mike is asking, what do you do if the lean-to is full?
You are always carrying a tent, so you just go set up your tent. Lean-tos, and that's just a standard thing that you do, because you never know if there's going to be space in a lean-to. There is an old adage that doesn't get followed as often as it used to, that in the lean-tos there, when the weather is bad, there's always room for one more. I had some disappointing experiences on this hike where people didn't make room. And when it's pouring down rain, you don't really want to set your tent up out in the rain. You'd rather get into that shelter. And people were sadly were not always as welcoming as they should be. And that was hard to take. Only happened a few times, but that's why you carry a tent. And some people avoid shelters altogether and just like to set up their tents or their hammocks, as the case may be. And but where there was a space in a shelter, I went on the hike carrying a tent, but saying I was because I was going to hike, I was going to sleep in my tent most of the time. I was adamant about that. And then I just became a complete shelter rat, because I just found it so easy to just dump my gear in. I had space to move around. And I just love shelters. And I think you either love them or you hate them. So that's how that's seen.
All right.
Now you go on a trail like the Pacific Crest Trail, which I just finished this past year. Over the course of 2,650 miles, I think there are 8 shelters. So you are forced to camp out in your tent out in the wilds every night, because there are no amenities like that. On the AT, there's like 275 shelters along the way that you can stay in. So it's a whole different experience.
And Carey, I think this is going to be our last question for tonight. Peter's asking, with all of the pre-planning, did you plan where to stay each night, or just wing it and see where you would end up?
I did not plan for every night. That was going to be a lot of work and kind of unnecessary, because I did have a spreadsheet. If anybody wants my planning spreadsheet, I'd be happy to send that to them. I've done that many times over the years, and people have found them very helpful. I planned what I could find in each town as far as services and amenities, that kind of thing, about how far. Like I said earlier, I plan to hike about 8-10 miles a day for a couple of weeks, then 10 to 12 miles for a few more weeks, then 15 miles, and then 15 to 20. And that was about going to be my maximum. So I had some idea about where I would be. In the end, though, your plan is just a plan until when you step out on the trail. And it was good to have that framework, but I did not know where I was going to be every night. And actually, that was kind of cool. Sleeping in a new spot, not really knowing sometimes.
Excellent. Well, as I mentioned, this is really inspiring, and I'm so glad that you gave us your time tonight, and that we had so many people with us to enjoy it as well. Um, so I'm just going to wrap up for the night, and thank you once again. This concludes our presentation for this evening, and all of us at Vose Library, thank you for spending this time with us in our Vose or Virtual Wednesday series. And we hope you'll spread the word and also join us on Wednesday, February 16th, when the Ragged Blade Band returns with live jazz music from African American composers. Good night, everybody. Stay well and see you later. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Good night now.